mechanical principles. There's this kind of overarching flow with these kinds of penetrative processes where you're looking at flow of material. So how you put the energy in and how it pushes out of the way is kind of important. So in the same regard, when you're using a chisel or a fuller or some form of incising tool, understand that what you're doing is you're not removing material per se, you are actually flowing material out of the way. So think of it that you are trying to part the sea of iron, right, when you're splitting. So it's kind of tricky if you just go straight down at it. So if you noticed in the basic mechanics when I did the splitting, I cut down from above because that is the most effective way to insert energy into the material and cause deformation, thus flowing outwards. But then when I wanted to split, what I did is I came a little low and I came in at a slight angle, penetrating forwards and down at the same time. And then once that started to separate, I just kept following that line. So that is always something to be in the back of the mind. I can't remember where I was going with that. But also, regarding the tool that you're using, I lifted out a few different variances. So I have that fishtailed chisel like that. And that's a fun one because it is a rolling tool. So it allows me to have dynamic in that angle that I'm striking at, but always getting the same radius of cut. And if you're getting a nice radius of cut, what you're doing upon your top plane like this is you're putting a radius, you roll the tool forwards, put a radius, okay? You're not having a flat plate of material and coming in with a square tool and doing this, and then doing this, right? That's weird. This works far better. It's got far more flow in it and it helps you keep in that track because you drop into position, roll forward, strike. Drop into position, roll forward, strike. So this in concept goes back to the idea of drawing down on the horn, right? If that's the radius of your horn here, and how that, I just saw Jess's face on the other side of the camera go, so the horn radius is that material, the chisel radius is the material, it moves forward, radius is again, radius.
Oh, I was actually just thinking our poor viewers are going to be so confused. They're going to have to go way back and watch the tapering videos to know what you're talking about, but I do get it.
The other one here is this fun one. This is a asymmetrical cutting edge.
No,
so
you're moving it too fast.
Ooh. Oh yeah, that's not good against there. How's that?
No, that doesn't really
I'll
work.
let you. So it's a fun one because it's asymmetrical. It is not flat on that outside.
No, it's got a bit of a...
In the same way that I did the offset fuller, right, or offset set hammer, I do this the same way because it is nicer to be able to get that straight by doing this number than having to get it absolutely upright. It allows me to be more dynamic if I want to cut in backwards. I can cut in backwards and get a backward push in my material, which would give me more of this effect, right? Which would then cause this to push up, right? So I have that. If I wanted to do something more at an angle to create a very bold, strong line, I could come in this way. So I'm pushing in like that. Come in this way and use that front edge to push this up. Very similar effect, just a different type of angle. Maybe I'll show you those in a second. Kind of fun. And then the same for this. This is, again, flowing material. And I'll let Jess have a gander at that once I stitch it for ridiculously large steel fire. So you'll start seeing an overlapping of principles and philosophies of use and philosophies of energy impartition into the material. You've got to constantly be understanding what happens if I go straight down with this. What happens? So naturally you think, okay, this just will cut straight, but you've got lots and lots of resistance here. So that will actually, as it's coming down straight, will actually push it this way as well. So, you know, understand what the energy of the tool is doing. When you strike, it's going to migrate, especially with something asymmetrical like this. So, you know, more symmetrical objects are predominantly going to incise straight down. But, and then using things in combination, do you incise a line first and then go in with a depressing tool like that, or a forming tool, or, you know, do you run a fullered line with, say, a radius fuller, which would give you a divot, and then run into that divot. So you'd be going like this, for nice insides, and then come in with a pushing tool to do that. Strange pronouns. So that would give you less migration sideways. Just little things to think about and play with. Anyway, if this is hot, I will. Not even close. I will have a play. What other things have I written on there? Pick the right profile for the job. If you want a nice straight cut, so if you're cutting down on a piece of bar stock, obviously do not use a tool that is centered, because that will cause you to push this way. If you want a straight line, go for a flat-sided tool. Also, you know, all of these have got a slight crest this way, but once upon a time, you don't see them very much in blacksmithing tools anymore, but there was a tool called a butcher. And a butcher actually had a return crest on it that way. And if you were cutting off bar stock, say with a bottom tool, which might have a slightly similar profile, you would come in, put your bar in there, and because it cut heavier on the outer edges, it would actually hold in better. So you can be very, very aggressive. It's a great way to chop off material quickly and efficiently when you're just trying to separate material. It doesn't have to be pretty, you're just trying to separate material, throw it out of the way. Where a radius tool this way, sure, it cuts up fast, but it's quite unstable. It doesn't hold the material, where a cut will hold the material more stably. A curved surface, if you're coming down from above, say with a hot cut in a Hardy, if it's radius this way, it will cut in very aggressively in the way that the horn does, but also if you get that energy implied from above with the hammer, it will want to migrate out, because essentially from that very center point, everything else is sideways energy. Anyway, rattling on, blah, blah, blah. So I've got a comment here, working from behind or angle if needed. This is going back to the splitting, also slitting. If you're slitting or splitting, you might find that it is beneficial to go halfway from one side, or maybe 2/3 from one side, and then come through, do 2/3 from the other side, and then obviously they're going to overlap each other. In my experiences with this, you kind of get a weird situation where 99% of the time you will not line up, which is awesome. So you'll wind up, you know, you've got your two sides of material like that, and you put yourself a nice line here and here, and you're chiseling away. You chisel down beautifully, you get to about your 2/3 point, something like that, and then you come up with the other one, and you end up like this. And what happens is you wind up with this like weird little rag bit in the middle, and when it does split, this section here has to be peeled out. So you then have to do like a secondary cut to peel that out. But sometimes that's the only way, because the material's just too damn thick to come through from one side. So in much of the same manner as when we were doing the punching stuff the other day, which I will have to revisit. So in order to solve that problem, another way to do it is come down 90% from one side and then kind of approach it from behind but at an angle. So you're coming in this way at it, so probably at like a 22 degrees. And then you're not so much cutting down from above, but cutting from end and splitting it in that manner. And you'll find what works for you based upon your requirements, your mechanics, but these are just to give you some good baseline profiles to start with. I'm going to just run through using those different tools, giving you some different ideas of what they will do. It's lovely scaling. And we've seen that one, Let's go with this one. This is a offset. Oh, that's toasty. And also, picking where you put your hand is, especially on massive material like this, is huge. You can go in and hold it with a pair of tongs, and let's see if we've got something to work. Those would be great. I think I originally made this tool for cutting off rivets, so that I could actually come in fairly flat and just chop a rivet head off. But as you can see, it works pretty well when you're doing kind of architectural style chasing, and I have used it for that. That's always a fun noise when you get a little bit of water in there, you get that superheated steam compress. See how nicely that works.
Will you come in and show the tool that you used on the first one and
Sure.
then versus the tool that you used on the second one?
So the first one was our standard apple seed cut chisel, and then this one is the offset chisel. Okay. Make sense?
Thank you.
Pop it back in. And I know this one isn't really a chisel, but maybe it is a chisel. If you think about it, a sharp edge really just depends on how minute you're looking at something. So this is a radius edge, as we call it. If you're cutting really big material, you actually don't want a sharp edge. You will, the physical mass of it is too big and it will blow out your temper too quickly. So you sometimes will go just basically for a little radius edge like that, and just accept the fact that you're going to get rag. It's going to be a little bit more tricky to push through, but if you're cutting 4-inch billet, what else are you going to do about it? So I'll come in with this radius edged one, lay that line in, which is essentially a fuller line or a chased line. Again, slightest amount of crest, a little bit of flat in the middle, it's mostly crested in the corners. I'll run that line through it. And then the last one I'll do is I'll run some with this thing. I actually have two different sizes of these. And they're a nice tool, I like the shapes that they make. And this one's slightly more modified. Creeping up on it. So this one has a little bit of roll going this way, so that as I strike in, it pushes this cheek out. Okay? And you could essentially make a double one of these. I did these for hand because I didn't at the time have the control of something like a forging press, but you could use this on a forging press, or say you wanted to create a kind of a reverse to this, and you want to be able to do a radius and then a radius, yeah, and then an out, like that, okay? So this one is basically the out, so that is that tool coming in there. But you can make a tool like this. I've got one of them kicking around, which I made for going under the power hammer. It just goes in, something like that. Does that scribble make any sense? Maybe. But yeah, it's just about creating profiles and making the material do what you need it to do. But you see that the radius on those are essentially the same. I put more shoulder in here for blend out, because this can sometimes leave with a slight center, what would you call it? Like a little center peak. So it comes up like this, and at the top you get this kind of like little nipple ridge that runs all the way down it. So that would then run down the center of your crest, running like that. So, you know, you do things enough, you figure that there's problems with it, so you make modifications. And I will check that pair of tongs will hold this. So I got really toasty. So typically I'd actually chisel from the other side so that my hand was off the material, wherever possible. Also, using a pair of tongs or making a handle tool that works for this does reduce the likelihood of you smashing the hell out of your hand. So, often, hey, well advised. I do like holding tools with tongs rather than having a handle tool. It gives me a few more options with angles. You know, if you've got a handle tool, you're kind of controlled by where the handle is. You know, if you're always straight up behind it like this, sometimes that is not a beneficial position to be in. Tool from the other side, because nothing is ever true geometric, and it might just be down to the fact of how my force goes in. Okay, so that is essentially fuller or soft edge chisel or radius edge chisel. Toasty. Alright, and I'll do that last one with the weird kind of beading tool. I hope this is beneficial, kind of like the thought process behind it, and understanding what's really going on. You know, the idea of flow of material rather than, you know, we live in a reductive world. We are humans. We pick up a sandwich, we take a bite out of it. We pick up an apple, we take a bite out of it. We understand reductive. We pick up a piece of wood, we start whittling on it with a knife, and bits come off. So reductive is a natural process that is in the world around us. But plastic is kind of a weird one. There's not very many times where you are stuck with a blob and you just kind of pull it around. I mean, I suppose like modeling clay or Play-Doh or something like that is, until you start taking bites out of Play-Doh. But you know, you don't often just say, okay, this is the piece that I have, and I'm just going to keep shaping it out. And that's why blacksmithing is quite odd to the brain, because we don't just limit ourselves to one piece. As a child, the first thing we do when we get a piece of Play-Doh is we shape it into a thing. We go, that's kind of cool. Grab another piece. This thing needs a horn. You stick a big pokey bit out of it. So, you know, yes, we can do that in blacksmithing. That's what forge welding is, or riveting, or collaring, and so on and so on. But you get the idea. Started to rant a little bit. All right. So my last one, which is going to be really fun to hold, will come in with this. And this starts off basically as a chisel line or an offset chisel. I did feet of this for a chandelier. I was actually trying to find an offcut from that thing from years and years ago, and couldn't find it. But I kind of did like a crazy chevron pattern with, I suppose it's chevron, with a center ridge down the middle of it. Wound up doing a lot of it on the power hammer, which was kind of fun. A little jumpy, so it's quite easy to ruin a piece of material quite quickly. Starting to come in. You have to kind of go quite deep with this one. In order to get the upper side of the radius to start engaging. Take one more heat at it. But you can see how it's forming in now, and how in many ways it's quite similar to the offset chisel, but there's a softness to it. So that offset chisel was this one, but there's a softness to that radius. So I might come in with this one now, which will help me round out that top. Okay. If you decide to get really crazy and get into the old school, like medieval stuff with all the chevron patterns and all that kind of thing, do a lot of really good layout, do a lot of cold incising to lay in good chisel marks to follow, and be meticulous. You can really ruin a nice piece of work just by going a little flippant with a hammer blow once, and damn thing jumps out, put a big old scar in it. You can actually dress out the scars a little bit. If you have a pusher or you use like a ball peen, you can actually push that incision back together and fade it out a fair amount, but it never disappears. You know, maybe with 300 years of black paint layered up on top of it, it might disappear, but otherwise, not so much. If you do have a jump and your hammer's coming out down, try your damnedest to pull the hammer out of the way. It's just really frustrating when you make a mess of a piece you've been working on for a while. Alrighty, so I'm going to use this one to dress out. This allows me to roll the top of it a bit more. Oh, that's going to be hot. Oh well. I think that's why I made it a little longer. You can see how it pushes that shoulder quite nicely because of the angle that you come in at. Ooh, that's toasty. Oof. I'll take one more pass with tongs. That allowed me to get in fairly aggressively. Something you might have noticed, there actually is linear movement, so this way, of the material. It's not going to be strictly lateral. So be aware of that if you are doing decorative chasing, that you have to kind of balance it. Otherwise, if it is particularly asymmetrical, so you're like chasing all the way down one side and you're getting a lot of movement, kind of how this one is, you will cause that piece of material to warp out on you. There you go, there's a little bit of fun. That is a combination of those two tools. You saw how the first one kind of cut in very quickly and aggressively, and then this one was really more for blending than anything else and helping to push that shoulder up. You get a little bit of upsetting here, but you also get quite a lot of spread that way because of the fullering effect of that radius.
And so just a reminder, this first one is an apple seed centered chisel.
So that one.
Second one was an offset
like
chisel.
That. Which could be completely flat on one side and then angle from just one side, but I prefer to do it that way.
The third one was the radius chiseled, what, about an 1/8 inch?
1/8 inch fuller, give or take,
radius. And then the last one was that combo of the offset with the rounded
which could
end.
just have easily been lay in this one first and then come in with this one. Okay? And or that one.
Lovely.
So there you go. A little bit of a thought. Kind of opens up some possibilities for surface textural profiles. It gets really fun when you start blending these things together. I'm going to hold you just there a second, Jess. I want to show them a leaf on that keychain. One of the first that I did that way. This thing, it's about 20 years old, but you'll see it's chased and this is radiused quite nicely. Cool. Go chisel stuff, go chase stuff. And carving, it's just the same. You can either do it hot, do it cold, do a combination of pushing and removal. It's kind of fun. I did do some bronze frogs some years ago, which were all manipulated, which didn't actually have any material loss, but essentially it was a pushing construct, almost like carving, but not quite. Anyway, go do it.